right, so let's look at the conditions necessary for photosynthesis. Of course, we'll dwell much on actually issues to do with light. Our discussion is going to be more on that. But of course, the process of photosynthesis requires that you have water, you have carbon dioxide, and that you have chlorophyll and also carbon dioxide. So those are the things that actually need to be there for the process of photosynthesis to happen. But of course, note that later on we shall talk about the different factors that really affect the rate of photosynthesis, and we'll see that you have some things that will actually prevent photosynthesis from happening, such as inhibitors or inappropriate enzyme, inappropriate temperature, and many other factors. We shall look at that shortly. But for now, we are going to basically talk about what is required. That's going to be the discussion that you're going to have. Carbon dioxide is a gas that is actually required for the process of photosynthesis. It needs to be fixed into the carbon or into the organic compound that is actually going to be manufactured. And I shall say that that carbon dioxide enters the photosynthetic process at a given level. Okay, it enters at a specific step of photosynthesis. We will see that. But mainly, the plants will obtain the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but can also get it from the carbonates, okay, from the carbonates that the plants can absorb through their roots. And then the same thing happens if you have aquatic plants. Aquatic plants still can get this carbon. Basically, the interest that these plants have on carbon dioxide is using that carbon. The carbon that we have in carbon dioxide and this biocarbonates is what the plants are interested in. Okay, so the aquatic plants absorb dissolved bicarbonates from water through their surfaces. Okay, remember that the atmosphere has close or approximately 0.4% of the gases being, that percentage being carbon dioxide. Okay, so that means that we don't have a lot of carbon dioxide within, what is the thing there? We don't have a lot of carbon dioxide within the atmosphere. But the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not the same amount of carbon dioxide that you can have in water, for example. Okay, so dissolved carbon dioxide in water is not the same amount of carbon dioxide that we can have in air. Water is also required, as we shall see, that with water we need two things: electrons and then the hydrogen ions. Okay, what you can call the photons. Two things are required from water. So you also see that actually the oxygen that we get as a byproduct of photosynthesis, that oxygen comes from water. Basically the process is that you will have what we call photolysis, that water is going to give you oxygen, the protons, and then the electrons. Okay, this can actually be represented as water giving you hydrogen ions plus oxygen. Now, if you want to balance this, balance this oxygen, you need to put a 2 here, such that the oxygen balances, and then you put a 4 here. But to balance the charges, put a 4 them. Balance the charges, you add 4 electrons this side. So we are interested in this and also this from water. Okay? So the sunlight energy provides us the energy that can drive the photosynthetic process. So that light is indeed, and light is basically electromagnetic radiation that travels in form of waves or what you call photons. So it's very important for us to really understand the properties of light, such that when we discuss issues to do with wavelength, how light is actually absorbed, you basically know what we are talking about. So the rays that we get from the sun, these rays have different wavelengths. Okay, they have different wavelengths. The fact that we have different chlorophyll pigments that can actually absorb different lights of different wavelengths. And then we'll also see which wavelengths are actually very efficient for the process of photosynthesis. Light intensity is another very important aspect that we shall talk about. The higher the intensity of light, or the stronger the intensity of light, the higher the rate of photosynthesis. The more light you have, the more photosynthesis you will have. That's the meaning there. And then the duration. How long is the plant exposed to this light? That's quite important. The longer the exposure, then the higher the photosynthetic activity. These are very important parameters to understand. So like I said earlier on, light is an electromagnetic radiation that travels in the form of particles called photons. The visible spectrum, that is the visible light spectrum, is the one that has the light energy that is actually very important in photosynthesis. The meaning of this is that not all these radiations of different wavelength actually are important in the process of photosynthesis. So what we are saying is that the visible spectrum, which has wavelength between 400 nanometers to 740 nanometers, are the ones that have photosynthetic ability. That means that they are the ones that can drive photosynthesis, and we generally call them photosynthetically active radiation. Okay, so you have radiations of different wavelength, but those radiations that are within the wavelength, that have wavelength within this range, are the ones that are very active. That means that the ones that can drive the process of photosynthesis. So light comes from where? Light comes from the sun. How does the sun actually produce light? We have two ways here. What we are emphasizing here is that the sun is actually hot, okay? And since the sun is hot, it emits radiations, and those radiations that come and reach the earth, that process is what we call the incandescence, okay? And then luminance is another term also related to light, that when you have electrons being excited, then you have light being emitted, okay? And this is what happens with most of the bulbs that we currently use in our homes. It's because of the excitement of electrons. That's what we have in LED lights, and that's what we have in fluorescent lights. That is luminescence. Okay, light coming because of the excited electrons, and then light that is coming from hot objects like the sun are the ones we call the incandescence. Okay, so when the light comes from the sun, it undergoes three things. One, it can be absorbed. Two, it can be reflected. Three, it can be transmitted. So what happens if that light falls on a leaf? Of course, the reflected light is that bounces away from the leaf surface, and it is what we actually see in our eyes. So the leaves are actually green because of the reflected light that comes from the leaves. Okay, and then we have light that passes through the leaves and is not absorbed, that is transmission. And then absorption is where the photosynthetic pigments absorb this light energy and later on use it for the process of photosynthesis. So 70% of the absorbed light is actually used in photosynthesis, and then 30% goes through the leaf without being used. Like we said, these radiations have different wavelengths, but the radiation's wavelength of 400 nanometers and also 680 nanometers are actually the ones that are very important, or that are very photosynthetically active, okay, in photosynthesis. So they are the ones that are most absorbed. Red and green light, they are the ones that are most